What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you guys another video. Today I'm bringing you guys a video on Power Rangers Beast Morphers Episode 3. This episode was really good. It is called End of the Road, and this episode did a bunch of things. It featured the first full morph sequence for the Rangers. It featured the first Instamorph for Roxy, which was cool. It featured a new monster, and it featured some backstory for Nate. So all four of those things got to happen, which is really exciting, and so that and more. So let's get started. Oh, it also featured the first appearance of a new weapon, or a combination. We'll get into that very quickly. So, very beginning of the episode, it starts off with us seeing that Zoe heads into the lab area where Nate has developed a way to combine the Beast X Saber weapon with the Beast X Blaster weapon to create the Beast X Cannon. And so that's a new tool for Zoe to use, and we'll see that later in the episode. Additionally, what happens is that Zoe was working with Nate to develop a bike that would be powered by Morph X energy called an X bike. Makes sense. And so she actually ends up riding down to the to a construction site because the mayor, which is Devin's father, is looking to bulldoze a whole section of a forest to turn it into a whole new highway or road path or whatever, so that there will be a reduced amount of traffic. What happens is that she decides to jump in front of a construction bulldozer. And what happens is that she does this because she wants to save this little gecko or iguana or whatever that's on the ground. And she basically, and she explains to them that you don't want to harm this nature and this wildlife. There has to be another way to protect the environment. And what happens is that she says, I bet I can think of something that will save you a lot of money and be more useful. And the thing is that we also see in the meantime that who's there but Zoe's mother. This is the first time we've actually got to see Zoe's mother, and so it's important to note that because that means we have one family member from all three Rangers, which is not something that always happens. Plenty of times over, you only see maybe one or two or zero. The fact that all three have it, because there's the mayor, there's Commander Shaw, and then there's her mother. And her mother is a news broadcaster. So what happens is that her mother sees her, and she basically explains to the mayor, Zoe, that she has this thing called a Morph X bike, and she thinks that if she can get enough people to ride it, then there will be less of a reason for them to do this construction work, and that will lead to less deforestation. So she's pretty much an environmentalist, very similar to Emma from Power Rangers Megaforce. If you remember her in Megaforce, she was all about nature. There was that one episode where she ended up singing to protect nature. Well, there was that whole nature thing that she did in Megaforce. If you go back and watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about if you haven't seen it before. But yeah, so people are already saying online, Zoe already seems like more of an environmentalist than Emma was, which is interesting. Again, we have to see how far this goes. It could be a one-off thing, but also her execution of being an environmentalist is done really well. So what happens is that the mayor says that he'll give her 1 week chance to produce these bikes and then have people ride them. If they're rode a lot and people are really liking them, then he'll stop the construction work. If they aren't, after a week, then they'll bulldoze the forest and they'll create a new roadway. So she begins to sell Morph X bikes in the streets that are just available to everyone, similar to a lot of things that are done in New York City and stuff like that, where there's like bike paths and there's like bikes that you can pay a small fee and then you can go and ride them, and then you just park them wherever there's like a bike rack available that is specifically for that kind of thing. So in the meantime, what we do end up seeing is that Blaze and Roxy are at the evil base, and in the cyber dimension, and what happens is that Scrozzle's complaining about how the avatars, which are Blaze and Roxy, aren't really successful. They're not really getting much Morph X energy, and how terrible they are. In reality, they're like very committed to their craft, and they have much greater ability to do more things than Scrozzle can even do. And so they end up mentioning the fact that, look at what one of the Rangers decided to show, which was this whole entire idea of the Morph X bike. So they're thinking that maybe they can take the Morph X from the bikes so that they can use it to bring, Evox into the real world. Because again, if they can get enough of them, it would be enough to probably power Evox. So what happens is that Blaze goes down to Earth. He's annoyed at Scrozzle for the way he spoke to him. And what happens is he ends up trying to take some of the Morphex energy, and he creates a monster known as Needletron. So Needletron is introduced, and what happens is that at the same time we see that the Rangers are trying to promote the bikes. They're trying different things to sell it, though people are not that interested. The one thing that does get them interested is because Ben and Betty, earlier when they saw the Morphex bike, decided that they wanted to make their own bike using the same parts, but in this case they made one that's a two-seater, so that made more people way more interested, because it's like, hey, I can take my friend or so-and-so with me on a ride. So that's kind of nice, and they're not too goofy in that sequence, though towards the end of it they do fall into a body of water, so there is some goofiness because the Morphex energy ends up kind of breaking up and leads to them falling out of it. Is what it is. But eventually, the three Rangers are met by Blaze and Needletron, and the Rangers finally morph. The morph sequence has them in those black suits that we've seen them in for Ninja Steel. We've seen them in for a number of different seasons. They did it for Super Mega Force, and so on. And I believe they did it for Dino Charge. It's a constant thing with the black suits and then them transforming and everything going on around them. Though in this case with the transformation, they actually have like the whole tornado effect that they have in the Instamorphs, along with additional things like with the visors coming onto their faces and all that. Although we also get to see them helmetless, which is kind of cool. So that's really nice. As far as things go otherwise, what can I say? They then end up dealing with Blaze, which Blaze ends up fighting them, and we end up seeing at one point that Blaze runs out of energy, I believe. It's something like that. And what happens is that... I don't remember how this works. Yeah, Blaze runs out of energy, and then there's like a retreat or something like that. I forget the exact situation, but what ends up happening is that at one point, the Rangers also have this thing where they end up saving some of the animals in the forest, and we also learn about Nate, which we learn that Nate apparently he has family that live overseas, and he doesn't really have. He's like an only child, and he's always wanted a brother, but he doesn't have one. So people actually have been suspecting that maybe the brother that he'll have will be the Silver Ranger, because he'll make his own brother, because there's supposed to be a beast bot that will be Stag, and so people are kind of expecting that Stag might be his machine brother, basically. Again, we're not sure about that, but that would make a lot of sense just in general. But again, we're still waiting to see how Nate will factor into all this. And also, the gecko that Zoe saved is now Nate's friend, and so there's like some kindness and sweetness to Nate. And I genuinely like Nate's character. What we do end up seeing eventually is that when Blaze tries to morph again at a later point, he doesn't have enough Morphex energy, so he ends up taking one of the Morphex bikes, and he ends up riding down the street. In the meantime, the Rangers are following him, and this is going back to the preview clip that we saw already. And what happens is that they do all sorts of cool flips and tricks as Rangers and everything like that. And what happens is that in the meantime, we see that Zoe's mother is actually filming from a helicopter footage of the Rangers using the Morphex bikes and chasing Blaze down the street. And what happens is that eventually they enter into a building. When they enter this building, what happens is that they're met by Blaze and Roxy. Roxy does an instamorph, which is cool to see finally, and we see Blaze as well. And the Rangers end up fighting against them, as well as the Tronics, though we end up seeing as well that the Tronics get enough Morphex energy to power up Blaze's Morph X key. And what happens is, at the same time, if they're not careful, then Blaze and Roxy could actually lead to a big explosion occurring in the building that they're in. So they have to be mindful that if they're not cautious, they could actually lead to greater damage to the area. So the Rangers have to deal with them. What we do end up seeing is that at one point they manage to get enough energy for Scrozzle to summon a Beta Gigadrone, and he summons it to create a Beta Gigadrone version of Needletron. And so what happens is that the Rangers are contacted by Commander Shaw, and Ravi goes down with Smash to get into the Wheeler Zord, and he ends up using the Wheeler Zord and transforms it into Gorilla Mode to go up against Needletron. In the meantime, Devin tries to join him in battle using the Racer Zord in Cheetah mode, and also in the Warrior fighting mode. And he uses it, and he does the Cheetah X Strike to finish off Needletron. In the meantime, we also see that Zoe ends up fighting against Roxy, which is very cool to see a female-on-female battle, where what we end up seeing is that they're both trying to be clever, where they're both like, oh, you missed me, and then they end up doing something to each other to convince them that things are not as good. Like, for example, Roxy throws something at the Morphex bike, and so the Morphex tube ends up starting to react, and then Zoe throws it back towards Roxy and misses her, but instead what happens is that the sparkling energy that's coming out of it actually ignites a flame in the building that causes a huge explosion to go off behind Roxy and launch them away. So at that point, Roxy escapes, and Zoe goes back to the base, and she's like, I think I need a carrot, because she's like so out of energy. Following this, after the Rangers have finished off Needletron, what we see is that the Rangers head to the construction site. They're waiting for the mayor to come over and start the construction work because they haven't gotten enough bikes. But what happens is the mayor and one of his staff members is on the bikes, and it seems that apparently they must be doing pretty well, because the mayor ends up saying that due to the Rangers showcasing the bikes and everything, it's become a really popular trending thing now. So in other words, the Rangers made it so that it became popular, and so now they're planning on ordering 5,000 new bikes and not doing the construction work. So Zoe manages to be successful, the Rangers are happy, things are good. Betty and Ben appear as well. We see that apparently they found a way to separate the two-person bike into two unicycles, which they don't really know how to ride very well, so they kind of fall over and it doesn't go very well. But it's a nice kind of episode feeling, and generally speaking, it was enjoyable episode. It is nice so far to see focus towards Zoe. Next week's supposed to have some focus towards Ravi, which would be good to see. And we've already seen focus in episode 1, especially for Devin. So again, things are going pretty well. I'm liking the characters a lot. I'm liking the villains a ton. I think that this episode was another great episode for Kobe Strong, who plays Blaze. I think that he did really wonderfully. We do see 2 of the Beast Bots in this episode. We do not see Cruz, which is interesting, even though we do see the Racer Zord, but we do not see anything else. I am looking forward to seeing more of what will happen with the villains, because I'm really liking them. I mean, I think that Colby Armstrong is great. Colby Strong's great, and Liana is wonderful. I'm forgetting her last name right now. She's the she plays Roxy. I mean, really, they're doing a wonderful job so far with this show, and I can't wait to see where things will go from here. And just in general, I'm liking it a lot, So please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you guys think. Are you guys enjoying Power Rangers Beast Morphers so far? Do you like it more than any of the Nick seasons? Which Nick seasons do you think could be better than this? Or do you think that Beast Morphers is so far better than any of those seasons? What are your thoughts on it so far? What things do you want to see? When do you think that Nate will become a Ranger? Because that, again, is something that's already been pretty much solidified, though it hasn't been 100% confirmed. It's pretty much, at this point, very, very likely that it's going to happen. I'm kind of expecting it to be in the fall, but it may be towards the end of the spring. We'll have to wait and see. Again, every season's different with how they pace things. I know in Japan it was relatively early, by episode 10, Gold and Silver were introduced, but again, the timing and the episodes that they're using may be different, so it may be faster or it may be shorter. It might take longer, it might take less time, so we'll have to wait and see. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you guys think of the show so far, and what things are you guys looking forward to, and what theories you have otherwise. I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye.